now here we are, sat at the main boot screen using Chimera, and we've got the option to press the down key to make a menu appear. Now these are pretty standard options. So we've got boot, which would just try and boot the machine normally. We've got boot verbose, which will give us lots of messaging, and it will get rid of the Apple and Spinny logo. We've got boot ignoring caches. What that means is, because OS X uses a fair amount of extensions with binary segments in them that are actually the driver equivalents, rather than using an entire K extension, it will set up the binary and then cache it to a big binary file. It'll cache all of them. So we can boot ignoring caches. So if you installed a driver and you know that you got rid of it, but or if you installed a K extension rather, and you knew that you got rid of it, but you were still getting the same problem, you would boot ignoring caches. We've got boot single user, which will load a very minimum, which is just the kernel, the disk I/O, and a shell. And then these last two, which last three. Help is not bad. I suggest people read it because it actually gives you all the boot flags, which is rather handy. So we've got other boot flags. I'll just go through possibly a few of the more common ones, although you guys can read this for yourself. I've actually got a DSDT instant crash with this, but if I just start typing now, because I've actually paused the countdown to boot, I can type and things just appear in this little box. So something like DSDT equals null, or in fact I could have anything here. Basically, what that's going to tell the bootloader is to look, to not use the DSDT there by default, and use one called anything. And since anything doesn't exist, then it will ignore the DSDT. So if that is the cause of my kernel panic, that would my instant kernel panic, that would solve that. It would just ignore the DSDT so that I can get into the operating system. A few more of the common ones are arc equals I386. Now this is legacy mode. It doesn't mean run OS X in 32-bit mode, because the kernel is always a hybrid kernel, and even if you run this in legacy mode and you open your activity monitor in OS X, you will see 64-bit processors. So it's not to do with limiting it to 32-bit, it's to do with loading it in legacy mode, which loads some of the kernel, some of the core kernel extensions in compatibility mode, which some of them are 32-bit, rather than loading the more streamlined native 64-bit ones. So flags consist of, the name equals the value, if I could spell value properly. So flags are quite easy to use and quite easy to remember. So if I wanted to boot this machine past the instant kernel panic, I would say DST equals null. I'm also going to put in npci equals 0x2000, and I'm also going to put -v. So -v is the same as choosing verbose just by moving the cursor down, except I'm wanting to use 3 flags, so I use the boot command line. And now if we press enter, we see all these lines of text, which we're not really bothered about anything until it stops. And it's slowing down now, so it's got a problem with my Ethernet, and it's got a problem with the ACPI SMC platform plugin. It's waiting for a very important core component, which is Apple Intel CPU power management. So it's actually getting stuck on that at the moment. I would imagine that it's still trying to load, but in a minute it will come back and say I can't find it. But now I've got a starting point. Right, yeah. So this is where it's probably gonna stop now. But just to make sure, I'd always leave it a minute or two maybe. So we can see now that I've got a starting point. I know that it's the last kind of 6 lines that are relevant to me. And I know that it's surrounding the ACPI platform suite of K extensions, which have many dependencies throughout the system, but one is managing power management for the CPU. And we can see the gather C state overrides. So even if I just do a Google search for C state, it will bring up information about P states and C states of the CPU. So I can instantly now say that this is relevant. And I can post that information or search around for a solution online myself. So another thing that I just want to take a look at is single user mode. Now the problem is I've still got a DSDT, which I know to be instant kernel panicking this system. So I'm going to say DSDT equals sod off. And what I'll also do is I'll say V. Actually, I'll just say S. We'll have a look at single user. So X, by the way, is safe mode. S is single user. So what we'll get at this stage is it should go through loading things, and here we go. So it loaded a very small amount. This is what you expect to see, and it's a command prompt. Now it's already giving me the first 2 commands to run because it assumes that the machine is in a little bit of a problem, so it's going to ask us to run a check on the disk. And if we want to do anything, we're going to have to mount it in read-write mode. So I know there's nothing wrong with the disk, so I'm just going to say mount uw /. And now I've mounted the file system in read-write mode. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't be able to do very much. So we've got the same kind of commands well, as Linux. So if we say we've got CD, we've got ls, we've got rm, we've got mv, we've got cp, and these are the, and also I'll tell you what, we'll have cat and nano. So CD, change directory, very simple. ls, list. rm, remove. mv, move. cp, copy. Cat will actually catalog a file, which means we can print the contents into the screen. And nano provides us a very basic terminal-based text editor. So let's put that into context. Let's say cd, let's say I had to remove a K extension. So if I go to system, and all I'm doing is typing L and then pressing tab because it will auto-complete, because I'm very lazy, and if it's there, use it. EX for extensions, LS, and it will list me all the extensions that are currently in the extensions folder. Now if I want to remove something like, let's say, Voodoo, I can't do this because it's actually telling me, hang about, it's a directory, it's not a file. So what I have to do is remove recursive force, and it will remove it. So we can see that because it's a directory, we can't remove it like a file, so we have to use the recursive and force flag. In fact, I don't even think we need the force flag, but it's there. Now let's navigate backwards, so we'll just go to the root. Or if I wanted to go back a single folder, for instance, let's just have a look at this. So right now I'm in System Library. If I want to go back to System, it's just cd ... just like it is in Windows. cd ... again plants me back at the root. So let's have a look what we've got in the root. And we'll go to the extra folder and list what's in here. Now I've got a org chameleon boot plist. So if I say cat and then start typing and press tab, and let's have a look. And that's currently my my boot plist. So if I wanted to edit this, I can say nano. It's actually very early for me doing this. It's in the morning, very early, so I might mess up a little bit. And we'll edit it, and it'll give us this basic text editor whereby we can go down and start changing some things. So for instance, I can say graphics enabler equals yes. I can go up to the kernel flags here, and I'll put in something like dsdt equals null, and we'll also have v. So every time I boot this machine now, it will ignore any dsdt that's there, and it will always show me what it's doing rather than just giving me a apple and a spinny wheel. The timeout is quite important to me. By default, a lot of things set this to 2, which is not enough time to actually do anything. So I'd always set this to a larger number, because if I want the machine to boot, I'll just walk away for 20 seconds and then it'll choose it, or I can choose it instantly in the menu. There's also an instant menu flag that I could put in here so that it never has the timeout. So something like key, I think it's instant menu. In fact, let's just move this over. Instant menu, close key, and the value would be, or the string value would just be yes. So just put yes. I think that's right. If I get this wrong, it's not going to do very much other than just ignore it. So that would drop me to, you know, an instant menu rather than automatically booting. So when I'm ready to save this, I can actually just say Control X. It'll say, do you want to save them? Yes. Where do I want to save it? Well, the same file. Now, there might be a case where it wouldn't allow me to edit this. And it might be a case that I have to do a super user do action to then say nano or chameleon boot list, and then it'll ask for my password if full permissions and securities are set up on the machine. If I want to remove a file, rm dsdt, and let's have a look in that directory, and then the dsdt is gone. I can check my SM BIOS, and I can see that it's a Mac Pro 5.1, and the reason that will boot for me is I've actually heavily modified all things relating to Mac Pro 5.1 across lots of files, because it's my kind of little experiment definition. So yeah, this is a basic way to get in and start fixing things, and if we want to reboot, we can just type exit. Sorry, if we want to try and boot to the GUI, in fact we wouldn't want to do that. What I would do is say shut down, restart now, which would, oh, that could be Linux, but I'm not going to press enter at the moment. So this is basically the terminal, and it's fairly simple once you get used to it. It's not anything special and it's not complicated, and you can do a lot of nice repair work in it. So for instance, a lot of people decide to reinstall OS X 20 or 30 times, and I find that actually ludicrous, because the actual definition of insane is doing something over and over again expecting a different outcome. And to me it just wastes a lot of time, when if you're a little bit careful, you know what you're actually installing or changing, and you make backups, then it's very easy to get into the system and restore it if you're just doing kind of single modification tests, such as installing a K extension or you're changing a machine definition. So one example of doing that, what we'll do just quickly, if I go back into the extra directory, I've got this smbias.plist. What I could do is I could move smbias.plist. In fact, no. I'll copy smbias.plist and I'll call it smsafe.plist. So let's imagine that my machine boots with this smbias. But I want to try different ones. So now when I install different ones, they will be installed as smbias. But what I can do on the bootloader side is say smbias equals extra smsafe.plist if the actual smbias one that I installed ever causes a kernel panic or a crash. I've just got my backup that I know is going to work. So it's very easy to specify that flag in the bootloader, obviously not in this command prompt, but in the bootloader that I showed you previously.